Good evening. This is the meeting of the Communications and Policy Committee. Start off by taking roll. Ms. Meeker?
Yes, I am here.
Mr. Richards?
Here.
Ms. Walsh?
Here.
And I'm here, so we have everybody from the committee here. Also joining us this evening is Karen Fisher-Anderson and Kathleen Murphy. Karen, why don't you lead us off?
Okay. Kathleen, did you want to?
Yeah, I just, Karen and I spent some time on these particular policies, a lot of time, because unfortunately the policies went to the committee. They weren't exactly, they did not represent all of the changes and so forth that the committee wanted. So I think it's important that the work of changes always occur in this meeting. We're trying to do it online or while you're, you jump on the Teams and make edits. Gets confusing, especially when Karen and I go over them. We make sure the language is right, then Bridget gets it. Bridget puts it together with all the changes that we make. If there's other changes, it really got confusing. So I hope that we can continue to just make those changes here, make sure they're right. You see them before they go to the board, that's all. I mean, that's the kind of process I think would be cleaner so that we don't have a situation where we have policies and, Bob, you had to take them off the agenda.
Yeah.
I think Kara felt that they didn't represent.
Yeah, it was just an old version. It was not the second. We had amended it twice, and the first phase of amendments had made it to the book, but not the second phase of amendments. And to that point, I think that I had been marking up a copy early on in Teams without realizing that that was the shared document. But we sort of, at the time, it was like, that's okay, because then it gives Karen a heads up about what changes we might want to make in committee. But you're right, it does stay in that shared document and leaves it a little bit messy because there's not necessarily somebody there to clean it up. So I don't mind doing those edits in committee. What I will say is that when there are small changes or slightly conceptual changes that, if we don't see them again before they reach the board, they might not translate, So I know Pam had maybe once mentioned if there's a way to, if we're in the amendment phase of a policy, a draft policy, if we could amend it live, like on the screen, so that we can approve it as a board or as a committee, what that finished product looks like. I don't know if that's something that the committee would like, if that's too difficult. And if not, then it might just delay the process a little bit if the committee wants to see that draft before it gets finalized for the board. Does that make sense?
It does.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as far as my or Bridget taking the changes from the committee, reinserting them with what you've asked for, and then sending them out to you all to be sure you're comfortable. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're saying? And then
if that is a phase that you're comfortable with,
I think what Kara was saying was that, if we had the document live, then the changes were going in as we talked about it, then there'd be less translation for you and relying on notes after the fact. I think
It would just be a track changes document up there, like we're working on right here. But when we were finished with our committee meeting, we would have that set up for us to review and know right where we were. And so if that's a possibility, I think that's a good solution myself.
Well, it's very much like the solution that you and I talked about. When Karen is doing them, I'm doing them, then we're putting our stuff together. Now, this is outside of this meeting, right? Because we're doing work before we get here, right? And so we found that same thing happening. Even as of yesterday, when we went over making sure everything was fine for this, there was a couple of, and they were minor. I mean, number one, and one other thing, we missed a word, individual. From now on, we're going to have Bridget right there with us in our work sessions, making the changes on the screen in my office, so that we both see them and we see that they're done and they're done right. Because it is, you don't want to make
it's little things that kind of kill you.
Yeah. So let's see if I can work something out like that. We'll go forward. Anyway, that's all I have.
Right.
Karen, please.
Okay, well, with that said, if it's okay, what I was gonna do, starting with 462, the criminal, the background investigation, was go through the changes as they show up now, or allow you to just review them. The first one started in paragraph 4, to be sure we captured exactly. What's in yellow now are the changes that were incorporated during the June 21st meeting, when we sat here and went through them.
Okay, can I ask that we actually kind of go through it step by step as opposed to just the changes?
Yep.
For example, because the reason I bring that up is paragraph 2.
Yep.
I'm questioning whether applicant ought to be capitalized, since we just defined applicant in paragraph 1. I think it should be, so.
Okay.
And elsewhere, paragraph 3, same thing. Everywhere where we see applicant, I think it ought to be capitalized.
And that was probably, so I'm gonna see if I can pull it up, because I feel like in my very first draft, I had noted applicant was capitalized and said, hey, do we capitalize defined terms? You know, it was just sort of a broader question. So I think it's possible that Karen took them down because she was trying to satisfy my question about what we capitalize, what we don't. And I really don't care which way we go as long as it's consistent.
Yeah, and that's up to you all to decide, so.
Well, I don't know, I mean,
I understand why the first word under definition is applicant, it's in bold. We want it to stand out, but that word is throughout this whole policy in the middle of a sentence, and you don't capitalize the word applicant unless it's a proper noun, and it's not, unless it describes.
but it's a defined term. You know, I mean,
But do we define?
Do we do capitalized defined
all
terms?
the other defined terms? Background investigation, conditional offer of employment.
Well, as long as we're consistent, because if you go to one, definite applicant means an applicant. As you go farther in that sentence, we have covered person, which is capitalized, which wouldn't be capitalized other than the fact that it's a defined term. So we just need to be consistent throughout, no matter how we choose.
yeah.
The lawyer probably wants to capitalize
Capitalize.
more
Yes.
things. The former journalist in me wants to capitalize fewer.
Yes, I wanna take
gonna
down
say-
as many capitals as possible.
In a contract, usually if you define a term, you use the capitalized term.
May I ask, what do we do in other
teachers-
policies?
In the teaching world, right? The time we capitalize is when it's a proper noun and it defines a person. So all three of us have a different take on that.
Right.
Okay,
So I think we should be consistent with our other
Whatever we should be
policies.
consistent.
Okay.
Whatever. So do we do have other policies out there that use defined terms, so what do we do there?
Well, from what I'm looking at I'm looking at ours.
Or do we do
I don't have
different?
them in
It's
front of me. I'd have to go
inconsistent
back and look.
by policy. And this is the bigger question, which is what is a good use of our time here? So
Right.
we have discussed my ability to volunteer to help make technical changes to try to alleviate those what are otherwise annoyances in our committee, because we should, I would say, be focused on substance in these meetings, and then the technical cleanup would come maybe even after the board finalizes it with, you know, sort of like the condition that we all understand that it will be updated per our technical standards, but we don't necessarily have a technical manual. So are we gonna argue those things in every single committee meeting, or are we gonna like create a standard?
I've tried to create that list.
Right.
It's not very long, but Lyndon, unfortunately, you know, it's kind of, we don't use he and she, we use they now, so that we are, you know, we do that properly. District is not, you know, there's some rules that I can tell you about, but I can't tell you about this one as far as the capital and non-capital.
Yeah.
So I think really it's your discretion. As long as as long as it's, the only thing I'd say, and you all know this, but as long as it is capitalized in the definition section,
So, may I suggest that we form a subcommittee that Kara and I will serve on to develop a style book for the board that we will use consistent.
I'm very excited about this
And
proposal.
this is something I have done in other venues.
Me too.
And so, and then we can put that aside and at some point adopt the style book and make master changes to all of the policies to get them in compliance with that.
I'm amenable to a subcommittee, so.
And I feel like that provides some relief as we work through this season, knowing that each policy may come to us inconsistent with what we had previously worked on, and it's not necessarily something that, Karen had put in or anything, but, yeah. And like like for instance, the very first paragraph is A, purpose, and then A, definitions. Is that something we need to
Normally we're gonna have an A before purpose.
Right. So, those are small technical changes that we can definitely go line by line if that's what you're comfortable with, Bob, or we can just say this will be cleaned up.
No,
in a
I'm
technical
happy to
way.
just have it cleaned up, but I want to, I don't want it to be a situation where somebody can argue, well, I don't fall under that because, it's not capitalized or it is capitalized or, just another example. Designated volunteer.
Go ahead.
We defined it, it's number 7 down. We define it as A, B, and C, right? If you look at the designated volunteer in 890, there's A, B, C, and D.
And I think we had this discussion
There's-
at the
there's
previous
4 of
meeting
them
that
as
we
opposed
wanted
to 3
those
of them.
definitions to match.
They got to match, and frankly, under designated volunteer, I would mention policy 890, just to make it clear that a designated volunteer in both places is the same thing. Because this doesn't quite track.
Or we could
For
just
example,
refer
if
to
it-
policy 890, so we don't have to change both policies anytime we make
Yeah.
a designated volunteer as defined in policy 890.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Karen, go on.
No,
Go ahead.
this is exactly, I want you to get what you want, so
No.
the fact that you're going through it, anybody else, so how did we leave it on the
Hold on,
capitalization?
one thing.
Oh, sorry.
That often in board documents like policies, they'll put any policies that relate to it, like 890, they'll put under the legal reference list. So they'll list all of the policies that you might want to see the correlation between the two.
Right. So they're not internal, they're just listed.
They
Yeah.
just list.
That's,
So
it's
it
actually,
would
that's
say
cleaner,
Concord
yeah.
School, it would say CSD policy 890.
Yep.
Or whatever the policy is.
But we've referred to specific policies in our policies before, so I would just replace 7 with designated volunteer as defined in policy 890, because otherwise people are gonna. I had a couple of things a little higher up on 4. I just think we have an incomplete sentence. Contractor means an employee or employees of a private business or agency. There's an extra space
Right, and
with the
then-
comma. Or an individual is designated by the superintendent or their designee, we need a comma there, that contracts to provide services including, comma, we need to add, but not limited to, comma. And then I would get rid of that too.
So, Pam, if I may read it back, contractor means an employee or employees of a business, private business or agency, comma, or an individual as designated by the superintendent or their designee, is that a comma?
Comma.
Okay, that contracts to provide services including, comma, but not limited to,
Yeah.
and then you want the colon
Yeah,
in the
and it
fourth.
actually should be a who, not a that.
Who.
And then,
That's why they call it the communications committee, because we're trying to figure out how to communicate.
so we refer to, do we need 7? Because in covered person, we have designated volunteer and the reference to policy 890.
Yeah. Yeah, good question. I mean, if we,
I feel like we've done it in 5, that we don't need it again in 7.
But it does define
Right.
their role, I mean, comes in direct to me.
But we were talking about getting rid of that and just referring to 890 and 7, which
What
are
is
two
designated-
in number.
Instead of
What is
designated
designated
volunteer
volunteer?
below, we could just say as defined.
defined
As
in.
defined.
Yeah, but I'm just looking at number 5,
Yeah.
where we
Yeah.
have,
We could
Same,
say
same.
that as defined in 890 and leave it there
Yeah.
and take out 7.
Yeah.
That would work.
Because I do agree we would need to change the language, because right now it says see board policy 890 for additional provisions relating to,
Yeah.
it doesn't specifically cite the definition.
Right.
So we remove 7.
7.
And just,
And do we do redefine 5 or reword 5?
Mm-hmm.
And the definition of designated volunteer is, and that's outlined in the next policy we're gonna look at. So 2, and there's 1 through 4.
Yeah, so as we have designated volunteer on that, so if we did on the first sentence, designated volunteer as defined in policy 890,
and the only other thing I would say
and then
here
get rid
is
of that, only
designated
those
volunteer
volunteers.
are considered covered employees. We don't have covered employees here. I
It
don't-
means covered person.
Covered person, yeah. So it's not covered employees.
Oh, but yes, but we have covered employees.
They are considered covered persons, and,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then the designated volunteer in 7, A, B, and C that we are getting rid of. A, B, and C doesn't match up with
Right, that's why we're just gonna refer
890,
to.
so we're going to have, which one do we want in 890?
We're just
If we're gonna
gonna
refer
refer-
to 890, which one do we want in 890?
Well, why don't,
I think we want the ones in 890.
90.
Okay,
Okay,
so we want a daily basis, not a predictable basis. So if someone comes on a weekly basis, they're not a designated volunteer.
Well,
It's anybody the
we have
superintendent wants to designate.
meets regularly with students.
You guys are gonna hate me, but I thought you did away with that designated volunteer definition under 7, so why do you even need A, B, and C?
Well, all I'm
You
saying
don't.
is
You don't.
we got rid of it and we don't need it, but when we had it in there, we were saying a designated volunteer comes in contact with students on a predictable basis
Instead of, yep.
and not a daily basis. So if I come into contact with students on a weekly basis, I'm not a designated volunteer.
Yeah, and it.
So
if
which
you use
one,
words-
let's just make sure we were using the one we want
Right, I
in
think the one that we
890.
spent
We used
time
it.
on was the one
Right.
before 62.
Well,
Yeah,
I-
under
yeah.
890, we use daily, we use regularly.
Yep.
So when
And
we
we
go
also
to
use-
890, let's go back and look at A, B, and C and
Yeah.
pick which one we
Yeah,
want.
but we also allow the superintendent to designate anybody
Mm-hmm.
she wants, so I'm got a little comfort there.
Okay.
Can we, just because we're all there at the same time before we go to the next page, can you talk about number 5 one more time, and I'll make sure I got it really clear, because I'm a little.
So covered person means every employee, stipend position,
Yep.
candidate, designated volunteer as defined in policy 890,
Yep,
whether direct, or any other service where the contractor or employees of the contractor provides services directly to students of the district, or any applicant seeking to serve in any of those positions.
okay,
Only those volunteers who meet the definition of designated employee volunteer are considered covered persons.
Persons.
Then I would get rid of the reference to policy 890 because we've already referred to it. All covered persons are required to undergo training as provided in policy 402.
okay.
Well, and the thing that says, only those volunteers who meet the definition of designated volunteer below are considered covered persons, we're taking out that definition
Definition
below,
below.
so I'd just take out that sentence.
Oh, yeah, I'm good with that too.
All we have to say is designated volunteer as defined in 890.
And then all covered persons, yeah, it's repetitive, you're right.
Okay. So, covered person, it means every employee, stipend position, and then candidate, designated volunteer as defined in 890, or any other service where the contractor or employees of the contractor provide services directly to students of the district, comma, or any applicant serving to serve in any of those positions, period.
Yes.
And then get rid of the next sentence?
Yep, and then all covered persons are required to.
Okay, thank you.
So two sentences are gone.
Yeah, so we get rid of.
200 training is provided in, yep, okay.
All right. Then we're getting rid of 7, right?
On under 8, do we only take educator candidates from institutions of higher education in New Hampshire? We don't get student teachers from any other state ever?
Of course we do.
So should that just means a student of an institution of higher education and cross out New Hampshire? Cross out in New Hampshire.
And are all our educator candidates, including CRTC, students at an institute of higher education?
Yeah.
So we may need to add something
Yeah,
there.
we might have to,
We may have to,
Means an student at an educational institution.
so if someone's at Grapponi,
Do they come in as student teachers?
why don't we just say means a person who has been selected to participate in the K-12 educator preparation program.
Way to streamline it, Bob.
I mean, why does it have to be a student, and why does it have to be higher education, et cetera?
I mean, do they have to be a student? They can just be a person?
The language, those
Well-
might be in the district for a different person, example methods. I don't know what that means.
yeah.
I thought we crossed that out, Karen.
I'm sorry.
Still in
We're
the
on
same
eight.
paragraph.
We're on 8.
The educator candidate,
Mm-hmm.
okay, means a person
Mm-hmm.
who has been selected to participate in a K through 12.
Methods class, it's a methods class. It probably doesn't need to be in there, but we have students who come just because to
Oh,
do
I see.
observations, and it's called their methods. So that really does
I
it.
Can we just get rid
think we
of
ought to
that
just
second
take that out.
sentence?
Let's take it out and
Yeah, I
streamline it.
thought we got rid of that.
For a different purpose, period.
Yeah,
Period.
Gotcha.
No, that whole second sentence.
The whole sentence.
Oh, all right, so
The
the
whole sentence.
definition includes both educator, start
well,
there,
the other,
delimitate?
you know,
Educator candidate means a person who has been selected to participate in a K through 12 educator preparation program.
Period.
Period.
That's it.
Okay.
Move on to 9.
Now, just, I feel like I have to just tell you this, this wording, just so you know, and you as a board can do what you want, but it is coming out word for word from the sample policy that was provided. You don't have to go word for word, but just so you know.
I don't think, I think the sample policy is a little esoteric in this case.
Okay, perfect.
we'll have to share that with Will.
I'd be happy to talk to any educator about the use of simple language.
All right.
Our non-section 5 offenses is still floating. Unless, is that part of section
That's
5
nine.
offenses?
Yeah, I think
It's all part of
Nine.
nine.
Okay.
It's part of
Yeah.
9.
Yeah. And they put the, the link.
Mm-hmm.
On educator candidates, and whether they get criminal background checks? Are the observation of these people who sometimes come for a day, is that why?
Where are you, Pam?
I am in 2, special provisions for educator, candidates, bus drivers, bus monitors, and substitutes.
On page 3.
On page 3.
D2
2. Yes, D2.
after 0.
Which was changed back to a 1.
Sometimes Word gets mad about.
Look at that. Did you see that?
Yeah, Kara just,
Mhm.
yeah.
I changed that 3 times.
I think it's because you're still in track changes until
Right.
you accept all changes, the numbering will stay.
Right, and that's what
Inadequate.
I guess that's what happened, but we argued that anyway. I saw her change it.
Word is evil. It's true.
And look at that, we capitalized applicant under D1.
Oh, you've done it a
What's
couple
it gonna
different.
be?
We've done it a couple different places, a little bit inconsistently here. I'm confident it'll be taken care
I
of.
mean D0?
D0.
That's
yeah.
what we were just talking about.
Which is
They did change
But
it.
actually E, because we have 2 A's. So.
So,
Yeah,
my
so
question.
we have some students who just come and just observe. They sit in the classroom and they observe a teacher. That's part of their methods classes
Okay.
or whatever. So the decision was whether they don't really have interactions with students, and so
That makes
we're
sense.
not asking them to do the fingerprinting. It's only when they become a student teacher and we know that they're going to be in the classroom, direct service to kids. And we do get people who like to come in and observe when they're in school. You might as well get to know what it's like as soon as possible.
Anytime we have the opportunity to open our doors to people without having to have them face obstacles is a great idea, I think. Like, if an educator candidate just wants to come observe without having to go through that process, I think that's fair.
It's really required too of their courses.
Mhm.
When I did, I had to do hours of observation before I even did my student teaching.
So can I ask a different question? In 2 on page 3, they mention bus monitors. In B, we take out bus monitors.
Yeah, DOE just changed in the last legislative round. It used to be that they were doing the background checks on the bus monitors, but now they backed out on that and sent it back down to the district to do it. And so when we talked about this the other day, we decided
Okay.
we didn't need to tell ourselves at that point to do it because we knew we were required to.
But they're in the headline
But
of
they're in
2.
they're in the headline of 2.
So 2.
Yeah, they shouldn't have been. They were, that's another one. Yep. They're out. They're no longer
I'm
in 2.
guessing that I stood with Bridget and did this, because you and I talked about it.
Yep.
I'm guessing that for whatever reasons, when she's making these changes, somehow if they're changes, they're not getting,
Like they're not accepted.
Maybe
they're
they're
not
not accepted
accepted
or
for
something.
whatever
Mhm.
reason. I stood there and did this with her.
Okay.
All right, okay.
So we'll remove monitor from 2.
Yeah, bus monitors are gone.
Okay.
The department,
All right.
I don't know what they were thinking when they thought they were gonna do all this, but they were not able to do it.
And we'll move 1 and 2 back over on the margin so they line up with 3 and 4. You'll catch that, I'm sure, Kara.
I'm being good. I'm like, no. I understand the difficulties of track changes and formatting.
No, I
It's
know you
not
are. I know
anybody's
it's gonna
fault.
be a
Yeah.
while.
I'm telling you,
Yeah.
we did this. Frustrating.
We pay for the background checks for third-party contractors.
Where are you?
6, fees for criminal history records check.
Yes.
I think that's a change we decided
It
on the
used to
last
be-
time we met.
It was in there that
I don't remember.
the person had to pay, but I checked with Michelle, and asked how we do it, and we do pay for background investigations excuse me, let me see how we had it before. District, okay, so it should say, is this number 6 still? Okay, the old one. Should say, hi.
Hello.
For the informational session?
Was last
This was last week, actually.
Was it last week?
week?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm off by a week, sorry about
That's
that.
all right. But you can certainly email any one of us.
You can email any one of us, or if you stick around, we'll talk
Is
talk
this
to you
a
at the
board
end.
meeting? I can just sit?
Yeah, it's a
You can
committee
sit here.
meeting.
It's a committee meeting. You're more than welcome to sit here, and I can chat with you after we're done.
That'd be great.
Well, that'd be perfect. No,
Thank you.
We're just parsing through some of the policies.
we're working on policy.
I'm allowed to be here, thank you.
So the change was put in under 6, should read, any applicant for whom the board requires a CHRC, or in the instance of a third-party contractor or organizations, comma, the district shall pay the fees and costs associated. So that was the change, unless otherwise determined by the board.
So we pay for, like, a third party. So in that case, then I don't think we need in the instance of third party contractors, because we're saying any applicant for which we require.
And do we do that?
Well, that was my question, and she said
I
we
mean,
do.
should we do that?
So, like, if Riverbend is sending someone into the schools,
Well, normally in the contract, it's, if they don't do their own, the way it was described to me, if they don't do it within a certain time, like say within 12 months previously, then we can do it. But normally as part of the contract between us and Riverbend,
Or
that would be a
Yeah.
condition.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm coming from, is why would we pay for it? We just put it in the contract that says that
Earlier
all
here, though,
people working
someplace-
in this
Here's
need
the
to have
other
it.
point.
Earlier someplace, though, it did say that we didn't have to do it if their employer actually did it first.
Some organizations don't do the depth of the FBI check. They don't do that, but schools do have that requirement, so they may do them at their company or organization, but they don't do to the degree that we do through the FBI. So therefore, we do the criminal record check. That's why we do it, because they don't have the capacity, they don't have that ability to do that, we do.
so
So
if I
that's
could,
why we decided to just, as Karen Fisher Anderson said, that's why we decided to do it internally.
so if I might make a suggestion, any applicant for whom the board requires a CHRC, for any applicant, the district shall pay the fees and costs associated with the fingerprinting and or submission unless otherwise determined by a contract or by the board.
I think that's fine, because
You know, and again, I would just point you to page 2B1, where in the red
Right.
that's been added, we say that if the third-party contractor has already done it, the superintendent can
Yep.
waive that.
So,
yeah. But if the third party candidate, I like Pam's better, because if the third party contractor hasn't done it, and then we will pay for it, even if they put
Or we
55
will-
people alternately, like hire somebody, works for us for 2 weeks, then quits. They put a different person in. Hire somebody, works for us for a month, and then they quit. And then, we could end up being on the hook for an awful lot of
And
background
then we
checks.
don't work with our contract.
Well, that's
Right.
why I think we put it in our contract.
Then we put it in the contract.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why I like Pam's wording for that best, because it gives us that option of saying, if you want this $500,000 contract, you have to meet this requirement.
So what I have is, for any applicant for whom the board requires a CHRC, or in the instance of a third-party
no,
contract.
get rid of that part.
Oh, just get
So
rid of-
strike until
or
the
any
district.
other- So for any applicant for whom the board requires a CHRC, the district shall pay the fees and costs associated with the fingerprinting process and or submission, comma, unless otherwise determined by contract or by the board.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Just one question on that. Do we want to have to go to the board, or can we let the superintendent make that determination?
Well, I don't think the contract has to go to the board, but I guess the
Unless-
language here was.
Unless otherwise determined by the board, unless otherwise determined by the superintendent or the board?
Unless otherwise determined by the district, and we can.
Yeah,
Okay,
that makes it easy.
that's even
By
better.
contract
Yep.
or by the district. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you wanna get into that.
I don't think we're gonna get
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah.
Other thoughts on or comments? People still reading?
I think I'm good. I remember that the rest was pretty thorough. And then,
I will add the legal, under legal references, if I understand what you all wanted, I'll add all the policies that are alluded to
Listed.
within the body as references.
Especially 890, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we have like 4 of them in here,
Yeah.
so, other policies.
Is covered personnel the same as covered person?
Where'd you see that?
Contractor and vendor provisions, I believe, has, hold on, yeah. The superintendent shall take necessary steps to ensure the third-party agreements which involve covered personnel. Is that a term that we need to make covered
Yeah,
persons?
Covered persons,
Thank you.
probably.
Or sentence.
and then it also says for such personnel further along, so we just need to change it in both places.
And where are you, Karen?
Sorry, it's just in that same sentence. It involves covered personnel, include a provision for such personnel. So persons, or person.
Such person, okay, consistency again.
And again, we just need to get some consistency as to whether we're gonna capitalize or not, because in H, we don't capitalize covered person.
I mean, I'm kind of leaning into the chaos.
And
I'm
in
into
J,
it
we
now.
do capitalize it.
Let's
go.
I mean, it would
Yeah.
be.
You know, if
Is
you
it a
alternate
defined
the
term?
right
You'll
side,
never
that's
know.
fine.
All of our policies should be consistent, but till we get there, let's be internally consistent. with
Yeah,
policy.
exactly.
At least
I
lays
know.
within
Pick
the
one
same
and go
policy.
with it.
See, I think she alternated so that, you know,
We could have this
we were right at
debate.
least half of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
This is my favorite topic. So.
So did we decide we are capitalizing?
We're,
We haven't decided.
We haven't
decided that yet.
We're still
Working
fighting
on
about
this.
that.
All right.
we actually were gonna create a subcommittee.
A
for that.
sub-subcommittee?
Yeah. Pam
Well, I
volunteered for
did
it.
hear that, but for this policy.
For this policy,
Let's
just
just make it the same everywhere,
Same
whichever
everywhere.
way you do it.
Okay.
I don't really care.
not capitalized.
Not that you have
would
to,
say
it's not that you have to get your own
I
way or
would say it's
anything,
more
but
often capitalized.
Okay.
You guys are-
As one of the lawyers here, I disagree with that. All right.
I mean, and there is a find and replace function in Word, so you don't have to do, so every
Yeah.
big A applicant can
Right.
replace with little a applicant, so
All
I
you
just,
have to do is one.
I just don't want you to have to
Well,
like
you wanna look
go
as you
over,
and
over,
then
you know.
Start deleting capital beginnings of sentences.
Yeah.
For our guest, I would just mention that you picked one of the less interesting people
No, this is the most exciting.
this is a
to me.
tedious.
to have to listen to, especially when you don't even have the papers in front of you.
Are we on to
Are we on
That's
to
good, so
890?
thank you.
Yes.
I
all.
actually have an
Yeah.
extra copy of the next one.
There you go. So you can read along as we,
You wanna-
Right, do we need to make a motion on this one, or do we wanna?
Oh,
yes,
Yeah.
I think we should.
so, is there a motion to move this to, what are we, first reading?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will move.
And I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Whoops, sure, you make
I
a
got it.
motion and I'm
Sorry.
not sitting.
Yes,
We're trying to be
Done.
efficient with time.
It's Pam,
Thank
seconded by me.
Pam and Jim, and yes, we're moving it forward to first reading.
With amendments.
4-0, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, on to 890 volunteers.
I have my first question on the title.
Just-
Is this volunteers or designated volunteers, this policy, which is how we refer to it?
I think it ought to be designated.
I
volunteers.
think so too.
Well, but
Does
we,
that mean that volunteers then don't have to,
Well,
if it only pertains to designated
Right.
volunteers and they only meet the criteria of 1 through 4?
right, because we had this discussion before that there are actually two types of volunteers,
Volunteers.
Right.
volunteers and designated volunteers. And so our efforts in early amendments was to try to make clear which was which and what is required of our designated volunteers at a higher level. I'm not sure we got fully through that, but I hope that it still has integrity in this draft. So maybe the title could be designated and volunteer.
So
well,
are designated volunteers a subset of volunteers?
They sure are.
yeah, they
Then
are.
volunteers would cover all of it.
It would.
Designated are just
this
the
lawyer
ones that
doesn't
we
agree.
require you have to do the background investigation
Right.
from the records check on.
I don't have a problem with, policy 890 volunteers and designated volunteers. That would be fine too.
So do we want to change into comes into direct contact with students to on
Right.
a predictable basis versus a daily basis?
If memory serves, we spent quite a bit of time working on,
Although meets regularly with students, I feel like is the same as 1 and 2 are very similar.
right, which is why I think we ended up with A, B, and C because we had combined some phrasing in the other policy.
Okay, so the most recent language we agreed on was in the
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the last time we talked about it, we were like, okay, the next time we talk about this, we should move that over to 890 if we're going to make it consistent. That's my
Right.
memory.
Right.
We wanted overnight field trip chaperones to be included in designated
Yeah,
volunteers.
I'm for ABC
All right,
as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Except they're different then, right?
Well, I think what we're saying
No,
is
Saying is we
Same.
want
A, B, and
C.
C instead of 1, 2, 3, 4.
we
Yep.
want what was in 462, A, B, and C in place of 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay, before you struck it, right?
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yes.
I'm
So-
with you guys.
Yeah.
We only struck it because we wanted to put it
It
here.
was a
Yeah.
replace. Yeah,
A,
we're just
B, and
replacing.
C it is.
So just a question. We talk about ABC, then we go on to volunteer application and selection. Are we, somebody who volunteers at the after-school fair or whatever it is,
Field day.
Field
or
day?
fig.
field day, do they have to do an application? Or is this for designated volunteers?
Only designated volunteers have to.
Okay,
Well,
so
that
this
says
is.
So
What
if
if-
they're only doing
so-
a field day, they don't come into regular
Okay,
contact
so,
or
but the point is, that it should not be volunteer application
Application.
and selection, it should be designated
Designated
volunteer
volunteer.
application
And it
and
said-
selection.
And people wishing to become designated volunteers.
Yeah, so it should be designated throughout here, pretty much, I think.
If that's what we want, I mean, the
Right.
question is, do we want to verify I mean, there
Well,
is
yeah, I mean-
there is another system that they use where they scan your license and do like rap
Mhm.
test when you come into the
Right,
building.
right.
So are we doing
I
that?
I don't know what the right answer is, but I do think we gotta make clear that if we're talking about designated volunteers or differentiating them from, you know, the occasional person who comes in and hands
That's
out
always
milk or
been the
something,
issue.
you know.
Yeah, the poppers at field day,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
So-
no, I-
once a year.
Queen of the popcorn
Right.
poppers.
I mean, if they have to do an application, that's fine, if
I-
that's the rule, but if it's not the rule, let's not make it the rule.
And it's a question of like, is it a rule? And I mean, well, with the background checks, you do have to fill out an application. It's sort of ridiculous in terms of the questions it asks, in the fact that they really don't relate to what people are volunteering to do.
So the question is,
Are we
if
talking-
we make this designated volunteer application and selection, all the things below it should only apply to designated volunteers and not the popcorn popper or any other volunteer.
Yeah.
Or else it can't be that way, we have to leave it as volunteer.
And here's the problem, if you only make it designated volunteers, even if you have a parent who's coming for field day, but they have a parent plan that says they're not allowed to be
Yeah,
at school
yeah,
property,
exactly.
we miss them.
So
Right.
then let's keep it and make it all
Volunteers.
volunteers do the application. I'm okay with that. That's a verify their. That's a.
I think the
If it's
principals would
enforced.
prefer that they have an application.
Okay.
In terms of the appropriateness of the volunteers.
Okay.
So here's my,
Careful when
here's
you say
my next
that.
question then. The building principal shall review and approve all volunteer applications, taking care to ensure no legal issues exist which preclude a parent or guardian from volunteering.
Right, that's
How
the
do they,
parent,
how do they do that?
How-
they do it
yeah.
on Power School. And because if there's a parent plan in place on Power School, when you go to the top, there's a symbol, and it will show that there's a parent plan, and if one of the parents can't have custody, it's right there on a symbol. So
So,
they'd have to look at it.
but wouldn't you then have to say that somewhere in here that if in their parent plan, they have a symbol, they're not allowed to be a volunteer?
We don't
'Cause
have
we
to
didn't
say
say
that
that
here. We don't
somewhere.
have to say that
Yeah.
here.
How about the building principal shall review and approve all volunteer applications, period. And then the principal can apply the parenting plan there.
If they choose to or not.
Well,
Because it just took away the requirement to do that, we just told them they
But
could do it.
there's more to
Our,
it.
our guest would like to contribute, so.
There's more to it than just parenting.
If you don't
plans.
mind, I guess the problem with that statement is, does that legally now put the principal on issue for something that maybe isn't well known?
Mm-hmm.
Would it be more appropriate just before the comma to say using district resources? So that regardless of what that tool is that the district is using, they need to use it, and as long as they're doing that, they're
They're covered.
shielded from not knowing something.
Yeah, I hear you, but
yeah.
again, I'm just a little, I don't want to make this overly onerous,
Yeah.
but I don't want people slipping through the
I
cracks.
think you're safe by saying the building principal shall review and approve all volunteer applications, period.
Period.
Okay.
And
But
we can
thank you.
train 'em. We can
Because
train them on.
volunteers that aren't designated, that aren't regular, volunteers have to, they come in, they use the Raptor. If there's a legal issue, that Raptor system will flag
Just
it,
as it.
including people who come in once or twice, so everybody has to use that, whether you're in, you could be just going in to pick up, a granddaughter or
Coffee.
coffee. Did you go through Raptor?
Oh, I go through Raptor every single time I enter the high school.
There you go.
That's because they know you.
They do know me.
And it's duly noted that they haven't stopped you.
No, they haven't. Clearly the building principal has reviewed and determined that I'm okay.
Yeah, I do. Just knowing from
All right.
experience, there are situations and circumstances which the principal is aware of, or that might not be in a parenting plan, or
By the way, since this is public and all that other stuff, I don't just go in for coffee. I usually am talking to a teacher or something else. I'm going to get emails if I don't clarify
you'll
that.
be fine.
Oh, you just like that coffee.
Yeah, I just going. No, I do like to talk to the cafeteria workers though, because they have a
Yeah.
deep insight into what's
They're,
going on.
and they do have a good cup of coffee.
Yes,
Custodians,
that too.
the custodians are ones who know everything.
Yes, the custodians as well.
But can I look at the very bottom of the page? It talks about school administrator. I don't know whether that should be the principal again. We're
Where,
just,
I think we added that.
well, a school administrator, but everywhere else it's the principal we're talking
wait,
about.
oh, okay.
That's very bottom.
I feel like we talked about it and we broadened it. I don't know. My memory's
Because
because
there might be something.
It might be a field day
superintendent-
where
Superintendent.
anybody's out there supervising and
Okay.
needs to do what they need to do.
Are there school administrators that said, well, nope, I want to terminate that person, that we wouldn't give authority to the
I don't know. I mean, I would
school
trust-
administrator
I
is a
would
pretty
trust our
broad
school
category,
administrators.
so
I was
that's
gonna
why
say,
I was, that's why I think Mr. Cotton brings up a good point.
Well, it includes your principals, assistant principals, and your special ed directors.
Are they allowed to terminate?
Yeah, they're, well,
Volunteer
in
services?
this case, you were giving them permission to do that.
Okay.
That language allows them. I give them permission every year, and they get a formal letter from me around any discipline issues. So they are empowered to make decisions.
Okay, I just was asking if there is a school administrator who would not have that power, and because this gives them that power.
Yeah.
I would trust an administrator over a volunteer if there's a conflict or an issue that needs to be settled.
And
I'm
on
gonna
occasion,
err on
there
the
could
caution.
be one in the building that needs immediate attention. And
Okay, I just wanted to pose the question.
So is this next language on the top of page 2, is that required by somebody?
Yes, that's in between the time we last met and
That's the main
I
one.
came back. This is new legislation that was approved.
Okay.
I receive that New Hampshire Department of Education revocation list pretty frequently. It used to be we got it once a year, but now we get it every time a new name is added to the list.
Okay.
So I get it, I look at it, I know who's on it.
And totally up to you. We can always be more firm than what's in the model policy. So if you just hypothetically, if you wanted to say, hey, anybody who's on the revoked or suspended educator list, regardless of the reasons, will not be a volunteer. Doesn't matter if they're volunteering in their area of expertise or not, or the area that they were suspended or revoked for. It's, I mean, that's
I was just thinking about the volunteer who might be wanting to do the popcorn at their kid's class, you know, but whatever. Okay, if it's required, it's required.
Well, and then they would be covered by. No, well, they wouldn't have credentials to pop popcorn.
Right.
You have to go through my training class.
There's a specific training for that.
With or without butter?
Right. Always with.
Did you say always with?
Always with. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
And we put those, we kept the confidentiality just for the designated
Yep.
volunteers.
So in the paragraph that starts with all designated volunteers with designated volunteers and, you know,
Those are all off, aren't they, that line?
Uh,
You can see it, yeah.
anyway, in the last full line of that, or another school district who has a legitimate educational purpose.
Yep.
School district employee?
It's
or-
FERPA language. They have to have a legitimate educational interest in being able to have that information provided to them.
Okay, but we're missing a word. Another school district person?
Employee.
Whatever. I don't,
I gotcha.
we're missing a word.
Personnel of another school district who
Yeah.
have.
No, it's not another school district. I think it's just a,
He's just
No, I think
defining that it's a person that does that. Yeah.
it's not another school district. It's
It's another.
it's another school district person.
Person.
Well,
Just like ours are, ahead of that, it was, you know, teacher, counselor, principal, those are individuals. School district is a entity.
How about an employee? What do we say?
That would be fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Because that hits pretty broad.
Kathleen told me early this morning that this was going to be a short meeting.
6:24.
No,
This is a short meeting.
Pretty good, isn't it?
I was like, oh,
There's
like,
only two
I was like
policies.
15 minutes. Yeah.
There's only 2 policies. That's short for
I'm
us.
joking. This is
And
good
I do
stuff.
want to be careful about the number of policies that we, try to work our way through, because it is, you have to be so careful in the language and how it's written and how it's presented.
I'll move policy 890 recommended for first reading to the full board.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Kara, you seconded.
I did, yeah.
Thank you.
And are we?
Waiting.
I'm trying to think back. Neither one of these have been to a first reading yet.
No, we
right?
pulled them at the
Okay, I
first
just wanted to
reading, so they
confirm.
both need
Yep.
first reading.
Recommend this. Got it.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
No, Karen and I are trying to establish what's up, we're looking at all the new legislation. The one that is really the one that we really wanna tackle is the new restraint and seclusion policy. So we were waiting for some additional resources to help us with that, so that's really an important one for us to do. There's a new protocol around dyslexia testing, but we don't think it's a policy related matter. It's really around our assessments, so we're not gonna suggest a policy with that. So we'll put together there were a couple of others, Karen, that we wanted to have, I forget.
Field trips is one of them.
Field trips
I've
was
been
the other
asked
one.
about a couple
Yeah.
times.
We-
I'd like to give that to you. It's recommended, it's not priority required by law, but it's still really important.
Yeah, we just wanna make
Okay.
sure that everybody's following those steps and notification and so forth around field trips.
That's good.
So those are the kinds of things we'll be bringing forward.
That's good.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.